The House will come to order. Members will be at their seats. The clerk has opened the roll and you may record your presence. Please rise and give your attention to the House chaplain, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Representative Wilburn.
Good morning, friends. Allow me to pray for you. Dear Father, thank you for each representative gathered in this room. They're each leaders elected by the people and blessed by you. Thank you for our Speaker, Dan Hawkins, our Majority Leader, Chris Croft, and our Minority Leader, Brandon Woodard. Each have accepted a large responsibility. Would you bless them with wisdom, unique insight, and sharp minds as they lead this body of decision makers? In the book of Proverbs, we find wise counsel. Take my instruction and not silver, and acknowledge rather than the choicest of gold. For better is wisdom than jewels, and all desirable things cannot compare with her. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and I find knowledge and discretion. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride and arrogance, and the evil way. Father, would you bless each of these representatives with knowledge as well as discretion in all things? Push away from any temptation of pride and arrogance and any evil way. Help us to protect the mission of helping the helpless and providing hope for those who see no hope. And I pray for the families of each representative. Even though many may be miles away, they never stray far from our minds and love. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Have all members had the opportunity to record their presence? The clerk will close the roll and record the attendance. Introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Bill 2065 by Committee on Federal and State Affairs, requested by Representative Sanders, an act concerning conventions under Article 5 of the Constitution of the United States. House Bill 2066 by Committee on Federal and State Affairs, requested by Garrett Hansen on behalf of the Office of the Attorney General, an act concerning employment. HCR 5005 by Committee on K-12 Education Budget, requested by Representative Poskin, a proposition to amend Section 6 of Article 6 of the Constitution of the State of Kansas.
The Speaker recognizes Majority Leader Croft for motion to resolve into the Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of considering those items under the heading of General Orders.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion carries. The Speaker appoints Representative Hoffman to chair the Committee of the Whole.
All right, welcome everybody. Our first item of business today is HR 6004. For the purposes of carrying HR 6004, the chair recognizes Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So committee or colleagues, right now we're going to address the joint rules and pass those. That's HC. Excuse me, just one second. Body, just one second.
Just to stand at ease here, just a few minutes. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Mr. Chair, pursuant to House Rule 1903, I move H.R. 6004, appearing under the order of business general orders, be passed over and retain a place on the calendar.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. All right, next order of business is HCR 5003. To carry HCR 5003, Chair recognizes Representative Humphries.
Okay, body, take two. We are going to do HCR 5003 now. It is the joint rules of the House and the Senate. Basically, there are no changes to what we have had in the joint rules previously, except the dates are changed to reflect the new biennium. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Are there any questions? The Chair recognizes Representative Sawyer Clayton. Representative Clayton.
Sorry about that. It's tougher to hear over in the cheap seats. I rise in strong support of the joint rules. We did have a very friendly discussion. The only change that is made to this is the date. And for the first time in my life, I might say that we might defer to the Senate in regards to any changes that they may wish to make, and we'll see what happens. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? All right, apparently there's an amendment coming, so we will stand at ease for a few minutes. Is Representative Osman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment.
Is it long or short? Fairly short. Okay, the clerk will read.
Move to amend HCR 5003 on page 5 in line 3 by striking all after is, in line 4 by striking all before the third A, in line 21 by striking initial, in line 22 by striking all after reports, by striking all in line 23, in line 24 by striking all after the period, by striking all in lines 25 through 37 and inserting a conferee signing a conference committee report may include a notation of non-support of the conference committee report or any conference committee report in which a conferee signs the conference committee report with a notation of non-support of the conference committee report. A majority of conferees appointed in each house that signed the conference committee report without such notation of non-support shall be required in order to submit the conference committee report to the House other than the house of origin of the bill or resolution. In line 40 by striking all after committee, by striking all in line 41, in line 42 by striking all before shall. On page 6 in line 7 by striking all after I, by striking all in lines 8 through 17, in line 18 by striking J.
Would you like to explain your amendment?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much. So effectively, what we're going to be doing is getting rid of the agree to disagree motion. And for those that are new, the agree to disagree, so in a conference committee or a joint conference committee, you have to have unanimous signatures from all 6 members of the committee. What we're effectively doing is requiring that instead of all 6 members can still sign, but they can, but any member can write down that they disagree with the underlying bill itself. As long as a supermajority on both the House and the Senate sign in the affirmative, the bill can then come back to the House and the Senate to be voted on as jointly amended. So we're getting rid of the agree to disagree motion. Here's the reason why. So to start with, I went to Build over the summertime, which is a fellowship, and we talked through all of it. A bunch of legislators talked through what is going on in their state and how might it be different from all other states. One of the things I brought up was the agree to disagree motion. And to a person, they all looked at me like I had a head growing out of my head because it is so weird that we have this process in place. We've had it, I think, since the 70s or so here, but no other state that I know of has something like this. Now, what it does is when you're at the end of the session, imagine it's like 8 o'clock, the last day of session, and everybody has been working the entire day. They want to go home. We still have 1 or 2 bills left to go. We have a conference committee that we have to do. So it's 8 o'clock on the House floor. We're going to conference committee. It's 9 o'clock before we can actually get into that conference committee. We're negotiating back and forth. After an hour, you don't come to resolution. Now, what do you do at that point? You've got to break from the conference committee. You've got to come back, work with advisors to get an agree to disagree motion on the House floor whenever the House reconvenes. And by the way, go over to the Senate side. Make sure that they're doing it on their side whenever they're going to reconvene. We know what their schedule is like. They sometimes aren't going to be there until 10:30, 11 o'clock before they actually reconvene. And by the way, then at that point, we're putting in a motion to suspend the midnight rule because of course you have to. We've got these bills still outstanding. So now you've reconvened on the House floor where everybody's sitting and waiting. And you then have to go back to the committee again after you've reconvened the committee. And when are we available? When is the Senate available? Can we get it after midnight? Fine, let's go about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. We finally have a conference committee report. We've established it. We come back to the House floor at 2 in the morning, and we finally pass a bill that under this process could have been taken care of 4 to 5 hours earlier. All you have to do is make sure that you don't have unanimous decisions on the conference committee. We save each of you 5 hours of time by just working through the process in a slightly different way. Like collectively, that's 600 hours of time of things that we call hurry up and wait, where we're all just sitting on the House floor going, when are we going to finish? We could stop that with this amendment. So hopefully, for all of our sakes and procedurally, we can just be more efficient and work through this. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Humphries on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment has some interesting facets to it, but here's the fact. I don't understand everything that's being struck, that's being added. It would have been great if we could have considered this in the Rules Committee and really looked at it and seen what was actually happening. But at this point, I think I will have to say it's an unfriendly amendment. We've had agree to disagree for a very long time. It works. We still have to vote if we're going to agree to disagree on that amendment. It does allow progress to continue. This, it might be able to be revisited when we do the joint rules in 2 years. But at this point, there's just too much uncertainty, and I would say it's an unfriendly amendment. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Osmond, you may close.
Thank you very much. I close move my amendment.
You heard the motion by Representative Osmond to amend. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Appear to have it. Noes do have it. Motion fails. We're back on the bill. Okay. Representative Osmond, you still have the floor. Okay, he yields the floor. Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Humphries, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports HCR 5003 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Humphries to report HCR 5003 favorable. All those in favor say aye. Those no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. Next up is House Resolution 6004 to carry House Resolution 6004. Chair recognizes Representative Humphries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, there were committee amendments, and I move the adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. The committee report is adopted. You may continue.
Thank you. So these are our House rules. I think each caucus this morning went through each of the rules completely. I'm not going to go through everything again. I will just make a few comments to save time and let us go on with the process. I think it's going to be a little bit of a process. I will let you know that the changes we made, some of them were technical, some just were updated language, some were clarity. There were things that we're already doing, but it said something different in the rules. And then there were a few things that are actually substantive. One thing, a few of the technical things, we changed the word assembly to the word house. We changed the word chair to presiding officer to more accurately reflect what's going on. The page numbers are no longer Roman numerals. They are now regular numbers. So those were the technical things we changed. A few of the updates, we took out the COVID language that allowed the speaker to put people in the galleries and other powers. We took out language that had to do with presenting of petitions. We took out language that talked about leaning on the railings. Didn't seem like that's an issue anymore, and even about computer use. So those were just updates to bring us to 2025. There were some things that just were about clarity. For instance, the speaker pro tem may take the chair at the beginning of when we gavel in, and the rule said something different. So we clarified that the speaker may designate who does the prayer. We clarified who may come onto the House floor, children and grandchildren, as long as they don't disrupt the decorum. We shortened closing debate for a member carrying a bill from 20 to 10 minutes. We updated language that said speaker pro tempore instead of just Speaker Pro Tem. Just all of those things that were basically bringing us up to date. There are a few substantive motions which are amendment changes. And what we did do, these are the things that we wanted to put into our new rules. We removed the midnight rule. We allow the chief clerk to shorten bill introductions when being read in. The speaker may re-refer bills to committee of the whole to expedite things. We changed something about conference committee with appropriations, that they have to, any appropriations have to pass from either one chamber or the other. And then we made some exceptions to the Open Meetings Act for the majority and the minority party. Those were the main things. I think you all have been over them. I would be more than happy to answer questions on anything specific. The one thing I do want to remind everyone is that this is a new resolution. We're not really changing, we're not amending what we had the last 2 years. Every 2 years we start fresh. And in this case, we wanted to do a bit of a rework and update the language, make things more clear, get those technical things taken care of. And that's what we've done, and I commend the Rules Committee for their work and the Chief Clerk, that was helpful too. And with that, I will stand for questions.
All right, to speak on the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Sawyer Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, body. I think that the carrier of the resolution did a good job describing what occurred in committee. You know, one of the good things about the Rules Committee is that by design, it is meant to be a nonpartisan committee. So I am proud to serve as the vice chair of that committee. And that is the important thing when it comes to our deliberations. We do that specifically to remove partisanship and to make it mostly about our sacred duties as legislators, to make sure that we are following everything above board, that we are unified, and we are often very unified in a lot of our decisions that we make back behind the dais when we have those discussions. Would like to remind a lot of you, especially our new members, that when the Rules Committee does convene, and we probably will convene several times throughout this biennium, that any of you are welcome to step back behind the dais and to listen and watch our proceedings, especially newer members. I do urge you to do that. Now, as a member of the minority party, though, I will say that we do have a number of tweaks that we would like to make when it comes to this. Some of these have been discussed with members of the majority party. And so with that, I do have an amendment.
The amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
On page 4, in line 20, after 4, by inserting infants or children who are being breastfed by their mothers who are members of the legislature, and paren 5.
Would you like to explain your amendment?
I would be happy to, Mr. Chair. So essentially what this amendment does is that it clarifies in our rules that it is acceptable for legislators who are nursing mothers to nurse their children on the floor. So that way, if we have, for instance, anyone who's chairing committee of the whole, they cannot gavel them for being out of decorum. I stand for questions.
Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Chair recognizes Representative Humphries.
Body, I will just leave it to your will, how you would like to vote on this amendment.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Seeing none, Representative Sawyer Clayton, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I close.
You've heard the motion by Representative Sawyer Clayton to amend. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. We are back on the bill. Representative Clayton, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, this is so frustrating. Most of the time I don't need a microphone. In fact, I'm whispering right now. So one of the changes that our committee chairman mentioned that occurred in this new set of rules is the shortening of the reading of bill titles. So those of us who are veterans, we may have noticed when bills were being read in, we're used to hearing a little bit more description. So now when they're read in, under this new set of rules, it would say, so Representative Clayton with a bill regarding marriage. Well, that seems fairly vague to some of us. Some of you might immediately think, okay, what does that mean? What kind of bill is this? What this amendment that I will be presenting here shortly does is that it returns us back to the old way that allows the reader to, or compels the reader rather, to continue reading the long form of the title. So that way, when we hear a bill that is read in on the floor, not everyone is on the same committee, not everyone is there to hear those initial bill introductions. This simply increases transparency and allows us to understand a little bit more specifics. And I think that this is important to us. You know that when bills are being introduced in committee, our chairs do reserve the right or allow the right for any member to say, all right, could we seek more clarification? This simply allows for that further clarification for the entire body to hear the entire title. I'll go ahead and turn this in, and of course, I'll stand for questions.
Again, it appears short. The clerk will read.
On page 5 in line 37 by striking to the first semicolon or period, whichever occurs first, and inserting except citations of statutes.
Would you like to explain your amendment further?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel as if I have explained it adequately, but happy to stand here for any further questions from any other members of the
all
body.
right.
Thank you.
Any questions? Representative Humphries.
So, body, I would say that this is an amendment that we don't need. As you know, when we read bills in, sometimes we're not really listening. I feel like the expediency of knowing what it is about, that first bit is what's really important. All that information is open to the public. It gets tedious when the titles are really long. I feel like we can all look up the bill as soon as we hear the number, as soon as it's available online, which is quickly. So I would say this is not needed, and for the progress of the body and getting on with business, that this would be an unfriendly amendment.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Sawyer-Clayton, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with the greatest amount of respect to our Rules Chair, I would respectfully disagree. I think that it is very appropriate for these long form bills to be read in on the floor. Sometimes the technological issues allow for us not to immediately pull the bill up once it is read in. Sometimes there is a little bit of a gap. And honestly, we are here, we have gotten a significant pay raise from the people that the taxpayers are paying us to do. And so it is our job to make sure that we are providing the utmost amount of transparency, regardless of how tedious things may or may not be perceived to be. So I would urge you to please support this amendment just in the interest of providing as much information regarding these bills that are read in to the people that we have sworn an oath to represent. And with that, I close. Thank you.
You've heard the motion by Representative Sawyer-Clayton to amend. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Noes appear to have it. Noes do have it. All right, division has been called. The clerk will open the roll and you may vote. Seeing 15 hands, this is a roll call vote. Has everyone had the opportunity to vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does anyone wish to change their vote? Seeing none, the yeas being 37, nays 85, motion fails. We are back on the bill. Representative Sawyer, you still have the floor.
Thank you. And I simply choose to conclude my time up here speaking, although I may have to come up here a second time. It remains to be seen. But again, to just continue to urge you all, as you consider various amendments that come from either side of the aisle, to not think about partisanship, do not think about your caucus. The only relationship that matters when we are discussing the rules is that relationship between you and your constituents. This is an opportunity for you to show them who you are, and to show them that you support our proceedings that will occur in the most dignified and transparent of manners. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Helgerson.
Yeah, I want to talk about an amendment on Medicaid expansion. Just kidding. I'm sorry, last time I was up here, I said that and thought I'd bring it up again. I wanted to thank the body, first of all, for your patience, but also people that put this bill together, or the rules. In particular, we've had a problem the last several years. Agencies, lobbyists, other individuals have found that it's easier not to go in front of the appropriation committees, but to single out one legislator, talk to them individually, and then bring an amendment to the Appropriation Conference Committee. I had the privilege of serving on that with two other distinguished members, and many times we would try to argue with the Senate and say, we don't agree with it, but if we're going to move ahead, this is what we're going to have to accept. By putting this in the rules that says, if you haven't brought it up and dealt with it in the House appropriation or the Senate Ways and Means, then you can't bring it into conference. It does allow them an opportunity to come to us and say, we're going to change the rules and then deal with it, but it gives them a roadblock, gives them a little bit more opportunity to stop the single-handed increases that we've seen in the last several years by a legislator to add on money into the budget. So I want to thank the body for adding that in. Now that I've said that, though, I want to talk about something else, and I do have an amendment. While I was gone in my high...
Hold on a second. Can I see the amendment? Amendment appears short. Clerk will read.
On page 18 in line 10, after the semicolon by inserting and, in line 12 by striking and, by striking all in line 13, in line 14 by striking all before the period. On page 19 by striking all in lines 13 through 19.
All right, now you may continue.
When I was gone in my hiatus or early retirement, or when I lost my last election, PAYGO was put into place. For those individuals that are unfamiliar with that, it is where the legislature is required, if you're going to bring an amendment down, you bring in an amendment to take the money out so you don't increase the budget. I agree and like the idea. But I also, if you were paying attention the last several years, I introduced half a dozen, maybe a dozen different amendments to get around the PAYGO rule, because I know that you can take idle funds, carryover funds, or other things to not really inflate the budget, but just take it from other places in order to get your amendment. I believe that PAYGO serves an important purpose in that it made us aware that we had to control the budget. This year, under the leadership of the Speaker, he has directed that we are trying to control the budget. And I said we, you know. Sometimes I'm accused of being 89. And I don't want to add to the budget because I see that by adding to the budget, we limit ourselves to do things for tax reductions. But I think the PAYGO rule has now become more of a little bit of a cumbersome thing, because a halfway intelligent legislator can figure out tricks around the system. Let us just vote an amendment, straight up, straight down. If it's a bad idea, there will be 89 votes or more. If it's a good idea, maybe there'll be 63. But there are the tricks there now to avoid dealing with PAYGO, and I think we should just have clear votes about whatever the issue is. It speeds up the process, it'll make it easier on the revisers, and we can move ahead. And I think that there's already a recognition that we need to control the spending that we have. So I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
All right, to speak on or to ask questions, Chair recognizes Representative Waymaster.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. PAYGO was put into place in this body, in the House, many years ago, actually prior to my tenure in the legislature, to serve a purpose that we're trying to control the budget. And we don't have PAYGO in the Appropriations Committee process, but we do have it here on the House floor. And the purpose of PAYGO, as you know, the carrier of the amendment mentioned, is to find the resources for that particular amendment somewhere within the budget so we can control the amount of spending when we're coming here on the floor. If we don't have PAYGO, and as he mentioned, we can just vote it up or down, yes or no, we run the potential of ballooning the budget on the floor when we send it over to the Senate. And we're trying to control spending, as he mentioned, with the new budget process where we're creating the budget, and now we're already going through the budget process. PAYGO serves a purpose in this chamber, and it has served a purpose in this chamber. If you look at the profile, the 5-year profile of the state budget, in fiscal year 2026, we are $489 million. We're spending $489 million more than we're receiving in far as taxes or the revenue for the state. And that carries through until fiscal year 2029 when we have an ending balance of only $186 million. So PAYGO has a need in this chamber. And the reason I also say we need to vote this amendment down and keep PAYGO in place is because for years the Senate didn't have PAYGO. They have recently adopted the purpose of PAYGO on the Senate floor as well. And I'm assuming that it's going to be maintained in the Senate rules when they decide theirs. So I would just say that PAYGO has a purpose within this chamber, especially in regards to the budget, to keep it from being ballooned into something that is astronomical. And with all, I mean, I have great respect for my former ranking member and the carrier of the amendment. But given what's going to be going on, and we need to rein in the spending for the state of Kansas, PAYGO is going to need to serve a purpose in this chamber, and so that's why I would ask you to vote this amendment down. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Helgerson, you may close.
You know, I'm glad we're in this discussion early. Fiscal responsibility. You know, years and years ago, and I know my wife is going to hate me for saying this because I'm already going back years and years. Bill Bunton, chairman of Ways and Means, would stand over there, and I'd bring an amendment down, and I said, you know, we're going to do the following to help kids or help the elderly or yada, yada, yada. And he'd have to put on his shoes because he'd have slippers on or in his bare socks and walk out here and say, you mean we're going to break the budget and where are we going to come up with this money? And he had formal authority and informal authority to make sure he kept us in control financially. Believe me, I don't know where he is right now, but there he is. The chairman has some of that same. Many of you know my history. In the last few years, I surprised everybody with a 2% reduction in the appropriations process and almost got kicked out of the caucus on this side. Last few years, I've been arguing with the chairman because I wanted to put restrictions on the governor on they could only introduce a budget of 2% increase. That'd be less than what was proposed this year. Fiscal control comes from up here. And if you rely only on here and the paperwork, I can figure out ways to introduce any amendment to add more money to the budget, but that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is teach all of us that if we raise the budget, we have consequences. Senate hasn't learned that. And believe it or not, that's what I told the Senate in 2004. You can have fiscal responsibility without having PAYGO. And if you're worried about how the Democrats will use this against you in a campaign, or the Republicans will use it against the Democrats as being too liberal or whatever, you know, it doesn't matter. The way it is now in campaigns, you'll be called whatever your opponent wants to call you. Heck, they called me a liberal supporting all the Topeka Democrats this last campaign, which is really irony. Look, I want a simple process. I want a simple process that simply says, I think this idea is good for the whole state, and by doing it, we'll accomplish. And then all of us just simply say, great, that's either a bad idea or a good idea, but I think that there's enough fiscal conservatives in this body right now to hold the line without any additional rules. I move my motion.
You've heard the motion by Representative Helgerson to amend. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Those appear to have it. Noes do have it. Motion fails. Motion fails. I said the noes appear to have it. Noes do have it. Motion fails. All right. Division's been called. The clerk will open the roll and you may vote. Seeing 15 hands, this is a roll call vote. Has everyone had the opportunity to vote? Clerk will close the roll. Does anyone wish to change their vote? Seeing none, the yeas being 38, nays 85, the motion fails. We are back on the bill. And going forward, I'll give a little bit more time, but you need to be loud when you say division, because I can't hear it up here. So wave your hand, division, whatever. All right, we're back on the amendment. Chair recognizes Representative Adam Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. I apologize. Usually I'm not prepared to get up here and speak unless it's on tax stuff. Trust me, you'll be seeing me plenty this year up there for that. I do want to bring your attention to an amendment that I have.
It appears short. The clerk will read.
On page 11 in line 13 by striking not, by striking all in lines 14 and 15, in line 16 by striking taxation.
Representative Smith, would you like to explain your amendment?
Yeah, I think you really need to, because let's be honest, especially if you're new here, these amendments are really hard to understand. It says you're striking this, you add a period here and a comma there. What's this amendment actually doing? What this does is it takes out the amendment that we put on in committee, in the Rules Committee, and I'll tell you what that amendment was. It's an amendment that I seconded. I actually fully support this amendment. It just got put in the wrong place. The amendment in committee was not more than a total of 5 additional bills or parts of bills may be included in a committee report recommended by the Committee on Taxation. This is a necessary amendment. I've stood up here last 2 or maybe even 3 years because there's been some abuse on this rule coming out of conference committees. The problem is this is the House rules. This amendment needs to go into the joint rules where it's followed by both the House and the Senate. So I appreciate the Vice Chair of the Rules Committee that brought this amendment. I intend on supporting this at another time, but really we've got these bundling rules for other committees. Tax is exempt. So I was trying to make sure that Tax Committee is treated the same as everybody else. What we've done here is the opposite because we don't have any bundling rules for other committees in the House rules. This needs to go in the joint rules. So with that, Mr. Chair, I will stand for questions.
Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, You may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I close and move my amendment.
You've heard the motion by Representative Smith to amend. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. We're back on the bill. Chair recognizes Representative Osman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment.
The amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
On page 9, in line 4, after meetings, by inserting hearings. In line 7, after the period, by inserting all bills referred to a committee shall receive a hearing. In line 10, after committee, by inserting to schedule and conduct a hearing on all bills referred to the committee.
Would you like to explain your amendment?
Yes, I would. Thank you. This is the every bill gets a hearing amendment. And the purpose of this is that every bill gets a hearing. We all work and represent 23,000 constituents who all want to have a voice up here, and all of you want to have a voice up here. And I think that we shouldn't bar any discussion. That doesn't mean things are going to pass. They're not going to pass out of committee. They might not pass out on the floor, but we should have robust discussions, and no idea should be off the table. And if you are working hard on a bill and you want to have that time that your constituents have the opportunity to address it in a committee, in public, that should be allowed. This is not an unheard of idea. I had legislative research look at it. They looked at about 33 states, and at least, I believe, 8 of them have a rule of this kind, where every bill gets a hearing, including neighbors of ours, Colorado and Nebraska. So with that, I hope you'll support my amendment. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Chair recognizes Representative Blake Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in opposition to this amendment because if you start looking at the timelines that we have in place, we are not a full-time legislature. And I would love to know how many states were just quoted as having hearings on every single bill. How many of those are full-time legislatures? We only have 90 days. As a matter of fact, we have less than 90 days in order to consider proposed bills. For instance, the Elections Committee this year is only slotted for 9 committee days. And so if they have to then have hearings on every single bill that are in elections, does that mean that they're only going to have 5-minute hearings on those elections? I mean, I don't think this is good policy, ladies and gentlemen. And so I would ask that you vote no on this because, quite frankly, we only have a very limited amount of time within this building to get our work done before we all go back home and do our other jobs. So this isn't a good policy. This isn't a good rule. Vote it down. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Osman, you may close.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So the states that they found that have this requirement are Arkansas, Colorado, Maryland, Nebraska, New Hampshire, Ohio, and West Virginia. I don't believe any of them are full-time legislatures. Yes, it would mean crowded legislation. In some cases, they actually do have modifications that say you have a limited number of bills that you can submit. So you do have to pick and choose. You have to be judicious up front as to what you'd like to present. In other states, they don't have any requirement of that sort. But yes, this works in other states. It's possible to do here. And it allows for the free flow of ideas, which is all I'm trying to do. So with that, thank you very much. I close and move my amendment.
You've heard the motion by Representative Osman to amend. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Those appear to have it. Those do have it. Motion fails. We're back on the bill. Chair recognizes Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and representing the constituents of House District 53, I rise with an amendment for this resolution 6004.
Thank you for the promotion, but Chairman is just fine. As it appears short, the clerk will read.
On page 4 in line 22, after decorum by inserting and paren 5, members of the media who are properly identified.
Would you like to explain your amendment?
Yes, I would, Mr. Chair. I'm glad about the conversations we've been having about being efficient and managing our time, managing our money. So I got a deal for you. You add 9 words, we're going to save millions of dollars for the state of Kansas. That's it. Kansas has an opportunity to hear what is going on in this chamber. I bring you back to your attention to, if you have forgotten, Marion County, the newspaper raid, 2023. This was significant because last year we came together as a caucus and as a group with a resolution that advocated for us to stand united for free speech and the free press. This is extremely important to our forefathers and those who have founded the country, for it is in the First Amendment right. And next, this amendment, what is important, is that it goes back to what we should be about, due process. By making a decision to ban reporters from the House floor, you have essentially created an issue for me to do my job, because you are dictating, as they are for everyone else, this is how your constituents will be informed. Well, we should have a say in that. So I add this amendment with the hopes that we recognize the value of free speech and free press, that the justifications that have not been given has stated that the stakeholders, both the state and the citizens, are not as important as what we deem should be the decorum for this House. Folks, we can't forget that the state is only as strong as the individuals that we represent. I give you this opportunity to add 9 words so we could save millions of dollars in taxpayers' dollars when we get sued. We are violating the First Amendment right. This should not be something that we even debate. One of the arguments might be, well, the Senate does this. Well, man, last time we stood united, it's like those Senates, they're not going to tell us what to do, and I encourage us to go back to that. And add the amendment, have the due process, have the justification. Let's be clear, transparent. Let's not raid the free press anymore.
To speak on the bill, the chair recognizes the real speaker, Representative Hawkins.
That's okay. So every year, one of my duties when we start the session is to publish the rules for the press every year. And I did publish the rules. Never did I ban the press from the body. Matter of fact, we got 2 right back taking pictures of me right now. One right over there and one right over there. So if they've been banned from the House floor, why do they do it on the floor? Why are they here? They're here because I didn't ban them. As you can see, this box up here is all being used by staff. For years, the staff has had to sit on that bench on the front with their computers working away, and nobody would be in that box. And I said, it's time that we start using that area for staff because they are working back there. And so this year I said, the press will not have that box to use. They can be on the south side, the south wall, along the rail, the north side, along the rail, along the back, or up in the gallery. Where are they banned? Now, we had press that went out and said that the Speaker, Dan Hawkins, banned the press from the floor of the Kansas House. And it went all across the nation. They did a good job. They got it clear up to New York. I got emails from New York. The lovely thing was, when I started getting emails, I took pictures and I started sending them. I said, if I ban the press, why is that man doing it on my floor? Crickets. It stopped it because I never did ban them. The the press decided to put out a headline that was not true. And now you're listening to an amendment come that says that I've banned the press. I haven't banned the press, and I can tell you right now, I hope every single person in this body votes no on this amendment because it's just a ridiculous amendment. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Haskins, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the explanation of this. I will close my amendment on the basis that this is the first time I've understood the justification for it. I think that we should, as a body, have these opportunities. That's why the amendments are here, are not to make people upset, but to make people ask the questions and keep us accountable. So for that, I close my amendment.
You heard the motion by Representative Haskins to amend. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. No's, division's been called. The clerk will open the roll. Seeing 15 hands, this is a roll call vote. Has everyone had the opportunity to vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does anyone wish to change their vote? Representative Humphries votes no. Does anyone else wish to change their vote? Seeing none, the yeas are 35, the nays are 87. Motion fails. We are back on the bill. Representative Haskins, you still have the floor. Representative Haskins, are you? Okay. Are you done? Okay. Chair recognizes Representative Nguyen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. I have an amendment.
May I see the amendment? Amendment appears long. Is there an objection to reading of the amendment? Oh, yeah, that's right. Would you like to explain your amendment?
I'd be happy to, thank you. While it may have looked long, it's very simple. This amendment says for education bills only that we will separate policy from appropriations. That's all it says. So I'll stand for questions.
Is there any objection to the reading of the amendment? There is objection. The clerk will read.
On page 5, in line 30, after the period, by inserting, no House bill shall be introduced that contains an item or items of appropriation of monies for the State Department of Education and one or more amended or repealed statutes, unless such amendments or repeals are an item or items of appropriation that is contemplated in Article 2, Section 14 of the Constitution of the State of Kansas. On page 10 in line 12, after the period, by inserting, no standing committee shall originate a bill that contains an item or items of appropriation of monies for the State Department of Education and one or more amended or repealed statutes unless such amendments or repeals are an item or items of appropriation as contemplated in Article 2, Section 14 of the Constitution of the State of Kansas. On page 11 in line 10, after the period, by inserting, a committee shall not take action to report a bill out of committee if such bill contains an item or items of appropriation of monies for the State Department of Education and one or more amended or repealed statutes.
The objection is waived. The clerk, the chair recognizes Representative Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I consider this an unfriendly amendment. I think there could eventually down the road be unintended consequences on how you interpret what is and isn't policy, and that could I think there's an element of policy to every single funding decision. You don't fund things that you don't think are good policy. And I think this is best left as the prerogative of the committees. Thank you very much.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Nguyen, you may close.
And thank you again. And actually, that same reason is the reason why this is a good amendment, because other than the newer people, past 2 or 3, 4, 5 years, we have had bundles of policy and appropriation. And while the appropriation was agreed upon, there could be 2 or 3 different policies that really had negative impacts on certain sections of our state. And what we've had to do was to kill the entire package. And we have killed entire packages 1 or 2 or 3 times until we got some of those negative or less than desirable policies out. So respectfully, the reason that was given for no, and you're going to do what you're going to do, but that is a reason that many of our education bills have had to go through the wash a couple times to clean out the negative policy pieces. But in fact, this amendment actually restores clarity to the process, and especially this term with our speeded up session and our streamlined session. It would be very clear and to the public and to you to separate it. But I do move my amendment. I think you need to think about this clearly, and I will call for division.
All right, you've heard the motion by Representative Nguyen to amend. It has been called for a division. The clerk will open a roll and you may vote. Seeing 15 hands, this is a roll call vote. Has everyone had the opportunity to vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does anyone wish to change their vote? Representative Penn votes no. Anyone else? All right. Seeing none, the yeas being 36, nays 85, the motion fails. We are back on the bill. Representative Nguyen, you still have the floor. Okay. Chair recognizes Representative Susan Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment to Rule 1704.
Is it short? The amendment appears short. Okay. The clerk will read.
On page 14, in line 42, by striking "may respond to" and inserting "shall stand for questions and answer all."
Would you like to explain your amendment?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. When you're in the minority party, you don't get to carry very many bills. I did have the honor of carrying a bill one time, and this is my 4th term. I've had it one time that I've been able to carry a bill. And I recognize that it's an honor. For many of you, it's like, oh, it's just another day, and it's not. A bill turns into law. So it is an honor to carry a bill. And the carrier of the bill bears responsibility of speaking to the bill which means that the person has some familiarity with the bill and is presenting that bill to the body, to all of us, and essentially giving us a summary of the bill, because you know many bills are very thick, but giving us a summary. And I have to say that most people, I think, do a great job of being able to do the summaries of these bills, because it's not an easy thing to do. So you're having to give the highlights, maybe the lowlights, maybe some of the controversial aspects of a bill. The carrier of the bill bears that responsibility, and I think they do a pretty good job of that. And if the carrier of the bill can't answer a question, the person is allowed to, we always call it, you're going to phone a friend, ask a friend. Maybe the committee chair or maybe another member of the committee that is more familiar with the bill is able to come up and give assistance and or even answer some of the questions for the carrier. And there's nothing shameful about that. These bills can become very complicated. We help each other out, and that's how it should be. And I think that also brings up that it becomes a very robust debate, that when you carry the bill and you're able to stand for questions. So when you stand for questions, that also means answering the questions. We owe it to our constituents to ask questions that would help legislators make an informed decision regarding their vote and be able to defend that vote when you go back to your districts. That's a very important thing. I don't know about you, but I get questions all the time about why did you vote this way on whatever bill it might be. I have to be able to defend that vote. I depend also on the carrier of the bill of giving me the kind of information. I'm taking notes on these bills, and to give me the kind of information that I need in order to defend that vote. What this amendment does is, I think, strengthens this relationship that we have, this responsibility that we carry of being able to carry these bills and answer questions. Sometimes it's difficult, yes, I understand that, but we owe it to our constituents and we owe it to each other to be able to answer those and to phone a friend when we need to. That's all this amendment does.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Humphries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically, what this amendment does, it changes, they may respond to direct questions to they shall respond to direct questions and so on. And the reason I think this amendment is problematic is because, yes, we should answer informational questions. We should be willing to engage, discuss. I totally agree with the maker of the amendment about that. But we all know that that has been abused here, even standing right here. There's been times when there are questions that are maybe hypotheticals. There were gotcha questions. There were things that went on that the person needs to be able to say, I will not answer that question. I do not need to answer that question. And in addition, Masons, which our House rules govern, but if it's not mentioned, then we go to Masons. And Masons is very clear that discussion is good and there can be questions, but it is not mandatory that the questions are answered. So for that reason, I would call it an unfriendly amendment. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Reese, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with the representative that just spoke about the bill, and that, yes, there are times when the questions can be very difficult, and they have to be when we are dealing with people's lives. And I think everybody can agree with that. And I think we can all respect that when a person says, I can't answer that question, I think that's a hypothetical. I think that's a gotcha question. At least they have answered the question. That's all we're asking for. So I ask you to vote yes on this. I think it really strengthens our debate process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Would you like to move your amendment?
I move my amendment.
All right. You've heard the motion by Representative Susan Reese to amend. All those in favor say aye. Those no. Noes appear to have it. Noes do have it. Motion fails. We're back on the bill. Representative Reese, you still have the floor. Okay. The chair recognizes Representative Potter Pershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't know about every one of you, but around midnight, most nights, I'm doing dishes and laundry because I have a 1, a 2, and a 9-year-old. So I am used to being up till midnight, but I can also tell you that debating bills on the House floor after midnight is more of a complicated process. So I have an amendment.
The amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
On page 1, in line 14, after the second period, by inserting, "and no meeting on any day of the session may continue after 12 midnight, except when a question is under consideration. The meeting may continue until the question is disposed. No meeting may take place between the hours of 12 midnight and 8 a.m. on any day of the session." On page 21, following line 34, by inserting paren 3, "A motion to suspend the rules and to permit the session to continue after 12 midnight shall require an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the members present in the House."
Would you like to further explain your amendment?
So I did a little research. After midnight, people have impaired brain function, an increased, if they stay up past midnight, increased risk of disease, a weakened immune system, mental health issues, and an increased appetite. And most importantly, no meaningful debate on legislation tends to occur after midnight. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Chair recognizes Representative Shu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've served with this representative for a while, and I can't tell you how many times we voted the same way, but can't be very often. But I'm in full agreement on this one. Like her, I'm a parent of a young child, and we have a lot to lose. And we especially have a lot to lose if we're driving home at 3 or 4 a.m., which I do every day. Not at 3 or 4 a.m., but I do drive every day, and I think it's just too risky. So we've already had members lose their lives because of this, and we have more and more young parents in this body, which is a good thing, but that also means there's more to think about. So I think the midnight rule is really important, and I'm in full support. Thank you.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Croft.
You knew it was coming, right? Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do appreciate the intent and I respect the fact that you're bringing it up there. So thanks for doing that. But, you guys know me. You've seen me in this process now for 2 years. I made every effort to make sure we work bills early, we work things through the session to reduce the load at the end. I do not want to go past midnight. We've only had to do that, I believe, twice while we were here. And both of those are right at the end of the process because we had a deadline to get things done. In here, we always check every time we're going to come even close. We call to the hotel rooms, make sure there's rooms available for legislators. We have cars available to drive people to the hotels. We take a very special interest in doing this. It's a personal thing for me, very personal, and I want to make sure that you know that no matter what we do, that always will be there. The other thing is we spend a lot of time debating and wasting time debating the process of going, and then we override it. So I assure you that I will continue to fight hard to get all the bills done early, to smooth the process as we continue to move through this. And so with that, for the body, I view this as an unfriendly amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in strong support of this bipartisan amendment to the rules. I heard my friend, the majority leader, speak, and I'm sure that my friend, the speaker, would echo his remarks. And I do offer my personal compliments to both of them for the manner in which they have conducted our proceedings over the past 2 years. Is that all? It seems like a lifetime, boys. 6 for Dan. I didn't say Dan, I'm sorry. That's a violation of the rules of the speaker. But seriously, I do commend them on their use of time. And what I believe on their parts personally is that they haven't tried to use the lateness of the hour to coerce members to cast votes which they would not have otherwise cast. I can tell you that when I came to this House nigh on 11 or 12 years ago, that was not the policy. I'm sure our Speaker Pro Tem remembers well the night when we were kept here on a Sunday night till 3 or 4 in the morning as his phone continued to ring and leadership tried to sway his vote. That is not an acceptable use of the rules, and that was part of why we passed the so-called midnight rule. But another reason that we have this midnight rule is the death of our former colleague, Bob Bethel. And I know the representative from Valley Center, I don't even know where he sits these days, but I know there he is. There's my friend. We went to high school together. He and I have sort of a different understanding of what precipitated Representative Bethel's untimely death. But the bottom line is, and I know the representative from Manhattan can tell us in great detail about what went on during that week and the fatigue and keeping the legislature late and trying to coerce, in my opinion, votes from representatives who elsewise would not have voted that way. But Representative Bethel died on his way home after a late night session. Some say it was the sun in his eyes. Some say it was his heart. Some say he went to sleep at the wheel. But the bottom line is one of our colleagues died. And what's worse, of course, is, or could have been worse, it's not so much even our lives of our friends in this room, but it's the family that you kill when you cross the center line, when you fall asleep at the wheel. Now, I have offered for the past 2 sessions legislation which would make driving while impaired from lack of sleep illegal in this state. Those bills have not met with success or great interest, so I have not reoffered that legislation this year. But during the course of my research, and frankly the research of the Legislative Research Division, on that legislation, I found exactly what the carrier was telling you. In particular, she was relating to business decisions. We manage billions of dollars in this room, and we shouldn't do it when we're sleep deprived. That is not responsible business conduct. I think most of our constituents would fire us if they realized how impaired we are late at night at the very end of the session, and we're not making good decisions. I know that I voted for legislation a couple of years ago that was offered well after midnight, and constituent number 1, my wife, has not yet forgiven me because my judgment was impaired. I wasn't thinking right, and I may have cast the deciding vote on legislation which in hindsight I should not have done. And I attributed it to lack of sleep, fatigue, and get out of here-itis. But the point of what I'm trying to say is the evidence is clear that business decisions should not be made by people who are suffering from sleep deprivation. And the evidence is abundantly clear that people who are drowsy and impaired from lack of sleep can be and often are more impaired than people who are intoxicated or inebriated or impaired by alcohol and drugs. Now, there is I don't know if it's a dirty little secret in this legislature, but something that's frequently not known by all of us is the Kansas Constitution gives us what's known as legislative immunity when we leave here and drive home at night. We drive back to a county of our residence. I can tell you that there are members who have used that constitutional provision to avoid detention or arrest when they've been impaired by alcohol. They've left here. It's not publicized, but it has happened. It has happened within my tenure in this legislature. Similarly, people who are impaired because of lack of sleep under the law have free rein to drive home in an impaired fashion and hurt and kill people. I'd offered a resolution to revoke that legislative immunity, but it also did not pass or was not heard. But the bottom line is we have worked well the last 2 years on those rare occasions where leadership has asked to suspend the midnight rule. Leadership has found a legislature that was agreeable to that. No good legislation has failed to pass because of the midnight rule. No one has died because of being here too late at night. So I would urge you to think carefully about this bipartisan attempt to preserve something that is not only for our own safety, but to preserve a rule that is good business practice for our constituents in the management of their money, and a rule that protects the lives of others who we may kill on our way home because we fall asleep at the wheel. So I therefore rise in strong support of this amendment and urge you to join myself and the carrier in voting aye on this amendment. Thank you for your kind attention. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Neighbor, did you push your button? It went off and on a couple times, so, okay, all right. Chair recognizes Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think my button was on the fritz. I have served during those times when we have been here forever. And I've seen us lose partners. I've seen us lose members of our family here. And that's unforgivable. I see exhaustion. I see anger. I see what is going on and why are we here. But we all know because the role never has been replaced, per se. It's a tool in the toolbox. My concern with this particular bill is that no matter how much our leadership tries to alleviate that, and there has been good faith effort, but it always seems it's that last minute bill that we have to pass. And by the way, it is a heavy bill. It's one that may have to do with guns. It may have to do with subjects that are going to have long and deep debates. Why do you put that at the end? I will never, ever know, except we are tired. We're hungry. We're angry. It is not a good time. And so while leadership can say, we'll make this as fast as we can, they have no control over about the 5 or 6 people that decide they need an amendment. And all of a sudden, it's not 12:05 or 1:05. It's 3 or 4 in the morning because the revisers have not had time to get the amendments done. That's something they don't have control over. But it's something that we do, because don't ask for it if we're going to be here till 3 or 4 in the morning. We're just as responsible as leadership for this. We are. If you want to be here and you think you can think smart at 3 and 4 in the morning, let's have a talk. Let's have a little bit of a debate on that. Where is common sense? None of us are good at that time unless we're used to working nights. The night shift, you're going to be smart then because you sleep during the day. We haven't had that opportunity because we've been here. We've been focused. We've been debating all day and our minds are tired. If leadership can't do a better job on calendar to make those decisions at different times or on different days, or to put bills that are appropriate, that are going to have long debates that they know of, they know because they decide the schedule. They don't have, as I said, they don't have control over those that write amendments. All of us do. And when we make that poor decision at 11:45 and you know you're not going to get it until 1:30, and everybody else is sitting here going, this was supposed to be over. This is a good, safe answer. This protects us and it protects people on the road. We need to support this amendment. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Potter Parshall, you'd like to speak on the amendment? All right. Yeah, Representative Carlin.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. I have sat on my hands every year since Representative Bethel died on the way home. But I was mentioned briefly here by a former representative, and I do want to tell you, I don't know what year that was, but around 10 years ago, so I was much younger, much stronger, much healthier, and more robust, but the night before his death, he and I were both hospitalized and not in attendance. I believe there were 5 or 6 people hospitalized that week, and I'd have to look that up. That may not be true. But I was hospitalized because I just collapsed going out at noon or something the day before. We had had several all-night meetings, and we haven't had that recently, and I have told the speaker and the majority leader that I appreciate the way the calendar is being held, but we should just spend one more day to finish up, one more day here for safety and for our best work. Is not too much when we have those big bills that have to be done, and I hope you'll support this. It was needless that we were actually collapsing from exhaustion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Potter Parshall, you may close.
Thank you. I will say that leadership has done an excellent job of trying to work with us to ensure that we are not here past midnight. But we also have had the midnight rule in place to where we had to vote day of, hours before midnight to make that decision. And that's why it is vital that we put it back in so we can make that decision that day. With that, I close.
You've heard the motion by Representative Potter Parshall to amend. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Vote period, have it. Division's been called. The clerk will open the roll and you may vote. Seeing 15 hands, this is a roll call vote. Has everyone had the opportunity to vote? Clerk will close the roll. Does anyone wish to change their vote? Seeing none, the yeas being 41, nays 82, the amendment fails. We are back on the bill. Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Wagner.
Thank you, colleagues. Looks like I'm last up, and I hope you appreciate your attention all through this period so far, and I appreciate your attention on this final amendment. So,
hold on a second, Representative.
Okay.
Amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
On page 10 in line 34 by striking an individual. In line 35 by striking all before the period and inserting a vote on recommendation for final passage of a bill or resolution shall be recorded by recorded vote of members. Such vote shall be recorded in the minutes.
Now you may explain your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment regards Rule 1306A on committee votes. House rules change. The rules 10 years ago are not the same as today. We have more transparency now. Bill introductions have to have the actual originator listed. Technology makes our committee schedules, our committee meetings, even our chamber sessions open and visible to the public. Transparency breeds trust. It is good for the body politic. It is good for Kansas. My amendment on committee votes continues this trajectory. Coming here in 2019, I learned quickly about how much of what we do is done in committee. Committee work is the work of the legislature. It is important, it matters. How we vote in committee is just as important as how we vote on the floor. And frankly, I ran for office because my predecessor in this seat would talk one way in the district and vote another way in the Capitol. And it was primarily in committees where this took place. It was a scandal in my mind and a huge disservice to the voters of my district. And I hear your voices, liberal or conservative, in this legislature, Republican or Democrat, as the session goes on. I know there are certain policies that are not so transparent that you really dislike, whether it's bill bundling, the lack of time we have in conference committee week and things before you're forced to vote. You know, we want a transparent process. We want clarity. We want accountability. Our colleagues around the nation do as well. Committee votes, what I'm proposing, final votes, are recorded and on the record across the nation. If you're in Arizona or Alaska, Colorado or California, Florida or Oregon, Wisconsin or Wyoming, whether it's a red state, a blue state, a swing state, a coastal state, or in the heartland, this is how legislation is done. Every surrounding state to Kansas, every surrounding legislature in Missouri, Nebraska, Colorado, and Oklahoma have this rule in place right now. And frankly, they've had it in place for decades. This is common sense. This is common practice. Again, many of you know colleagues who live in other states. You know committee chairmen who live in other states. You know leadership who live in other states. You meet them at NCSL or at ALEC or at other conferences or conventions of legislators across the nation. And you'll learn what I'm telling you is absolutely the fact. This amendment is not based on any sense of stretch or based on any lack of knowledge. You know, it is based on common practice. And again, I know people disagree, colleagues, people I know and trust and respect. I know good people can disagree. But my appeal to you today is anchored on the transparency of the process, on the integrity of our votes, on the willingness to own your vote and to stand by your convictions, and to make the Kansas House more accountable to the citizens of Kansas. And that is why this amendment is being offered. And with that, I open for questions.
To speak on the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of the amendment. The representative from Hutchinson did a very good job of presenting all the statistics on this amendment on what other states have, and 44 states have this. We're one of only 6 states that doesn't have it. I think it's time for Kansas to begin recording the committee votes. This only records the final committee votes and not all the amendments. And so I think that makes it more likely to pass, more likely to get support. Personally, I feel like we should record every single vote, not only in the committees, but also on the House floor. However, I know that wouldn't have as much support as a more limited amendment like this does. But I just feel like we do have a lot of transparency up here in Topeka. I think it's a good thing that people can go online and they can watch the committees and see what's going on. However, when people actually go online and watch, they can't necessarily actually see how people vote because most of the votes are done by voice votes, and you really can't even tell how people voted just by watching the committee hearings. And so I feel like this amendment is necessary to actually know how people on the committee voted, because you just can't tell just by watching the committee hearings and by watching the vote. And so I feel like it's necessary to have more transparency on this. Attorney General Kobach has spoken many times when I've listened to him in favor of recording committee votes. He thinks that that's important for the conservative movement to have recorded committee votes. Obviously, he's not a liberal. This is not a liberal amendment. This is something that both Republicans and Democrats should be able to unite behind in order to have more transparency, in order to have more recorded votes. So I just think that's important to point out, that this is a policy that has support on both sides of the aisle, among both Republicans and Democrats, among both conservatives and liberals. I would urge your support for this amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Sutton.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, first things, colleagues, I want to set the record straight just a little bit here. On the handout that you've received at your desk, it says 44 states have final action committee recorded vote automatically or by request. We already have that, by request. So rather than put us in the 6th column, make sure you put us in the 44 column, because that's where we actually belong. The previous speakers missed that little point about or by request. Now, let me explain just a little bit. There are some people who aren't as familiar with the committee process, and I get that. It happens. I think this is a well-intentioned bill, but the effect is going to be exactly the opposite of the desired effect, or maybe it's just a different effect than the desired effect. When we're in committee, we decide there what bills come to the floor. Pretty common knowledge there. I think we're all on board. Sometimes, not always, a lot of them are just rats and cats, and I get that. Sometimes, though, these are important bills that matter to many, many people across the state. The notion of a 9, 13, 17-member committee voting on behalf of the entire floor sometimes isn't appropriate. Sometimes we want more voices. Sometimes, I've been in this exact same position. Sometimes we want more voices to weigh in on a particularly important bill. Now, if I'm in support of that bill, that's easy. I just vote for it and get it out of there. There have been a number of times, however, that I am not in support of a bill, but I want more voices on it, because I think there might be people who know just a little bit more who aren't on my committee or the committee that I'm sitting on voting on this bill. And for that reason, I'll vote to pass a bill out that I don't support. I'll vote against it on the floor, but I'll vote it out to give the body, to give more voices their voice on the bill, to get their knowledge, to get their voices in the debate, so that we have an actual decision by the House rather than by the committee. So the net effect of a bill like this could be quite the opposite. Would I want to sign on to a bill that I don't support? Nope, won't do it. We won't pass those out, and the body won't get to vote on bills such as that, on the important bills. It's not the rats and cats we're talking about here. These are the important ones that more voices need to be involved in. those are the votes. Those are the bills that'll die. And I don't think that's the intent of the carrier. I don't think that's the plan at all. So, and of course, obviously I can't ignore, this isn't a driving force, but we can't ignore the notion of election year shenanigans on exactly that. Bills brought up, oh, look, he voted on this, voted for this, then against this. The ridiculousness that takes place around elections. And that's not a driving force for me on this, but we can't overlook that. That's also a matter of, it's kind of part of the job. It's kind of what we deal with. So we already can record our votes. Should we request it? We record our votes. We're part of the 44 that allow recorded votes if you so choose. We live stream our committees. I mean, anyone on earth can pull this up on YouTube and watch every committee, the debate and the voting. So to come up here and talk about transparency, I think is absolutely ludicrous. I think it's a well-intentioned bill, but I think it's got some tremendous shortcomings and will have consequences that are far beyond what the maker of the motion originally intended, I can almost assure you. So with that, I certainly would urge you to reject this amendment, and let's get on with our day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Tarwater. Nope. Yeah, you said ditto, okay. All right, anyone else wish to speak on the bill, on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Wagner, you may close.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments. I will fundamentally say that the prior speaker, with all due respect, does not understand what the Kansas rule, which is totally unique. Actually, Kansas's position is without precedent in the entire nation, where the rules, and this is from the KLRD, the rules of the Kansas House allow individual members to request their vote be recorded in committee minutes. The point of the transparency, the point of a clear process, the point of why we even have the board up there and the votes you take here in the chamber, is for accountability and for the voters. It's not that you have the option of your vote being recorded, but the votes would be recorded. And I think any of you can see the fact that what is done in other states is a totally different thing. And I think it's a sort of somewhat a misunderstanding of how we wrote it at the bottom. It's that you have some states where if a committee member, it's like raising your hand for roll call, where a member can request the roll call, and when that happens, that triggers the roll call vote in the committee. That it is not the fact of individual members requesting their votes. It's a question of being able to request a roll call for the entire committee so that everybody is held accountable, so that everybody has to stand up for what they think best and agree. Further, I would say, because again, obviously this discussion happened somewhat 2 years ago, that this is not obviously a totally new amendment to the rules, but it is something that the pushback, I guess I get on it, is that somehow this is going to somehow stymie the work of the legislature. And it's going to somehow make bills that otherwise would be wonderful somehow, not happen. And my question to you, again, I appeal to your reason. Why on earth do you have 44 other states that have this very same thing? KLRD pulled up the rules of Congress. Congress has this, that, committee votes are recorded. I mean, this is not, if there was some sort of negativity to this, why on earth does this not show up in other states? And why on earth is the fact that it's not only that these other states have this, but every other legislature around us, they have to approve their rules every 2 years. And they keep approving this rule of transparency. So that, in closing, when I first approached legislative research to dig into this issue, I generally had no idea what they would find. I first had them look at neighboring states, and it's like, bingo, I was getting this feedback. Then the Midwest, and then the nation as a whole. The more they dug, the more clearly it came to me that this change was one whose time had come. You can go north to Nebraska, south to Oklahoma, east to Missouri, or west to Colorado, and you get exactly the same wording that is in this amendment that is in their House rules. KLRD gave me 44 compelling reasons to ask for your support today. Colleagues, if you want a business that is excellent, if you want a nonprofit that is excellent, if you want a legislature that is excellent, you follow industry best practices. Recording final committee votes is unquestionably industry best practice. And with this, I ask for your vote, and with this, I close on my amendment.
You've heard the motion by Representative Wagner to amend. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Noes appear to have it. Division's been called. Clerk will open the roll and you may vote. This is a roll call vote. Has everyone had the opportunity to vote? Clerk will close the roll. Does anyone wish to change their vote? Seeing none, yeas being 49, nays 73, motion fails, or amendment fails. We're back on the bill. Representative Wagner. Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you for attention to the issue, and I hope this can come up at a later time.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Sawyer Clayton for the second time.
Thank you, body. It may relieve you all to see that I do not have a gray envelope in hand. I simply want to provide just a bit of a closure to this debate from my side of the aisle in regards to this. I do respect the Rules Committee. I think that we did do some very good work when it came to a lot of the needed and necessary technical changes that were added in this legislation. But I would like to address some final points that were made in the process of debating the amendments. PAYGO only stifles the debate on the floor. It does not keep our spending down. I asked legislative research for some numbers on this, and what I was told is that we have continued to spend more and more. All that PAYGO has done is simply disenfranchise those of us who are not members of the Appropriations Committee. And appropriating is our most important duty. That is what we are here. The legislature holds the power of the purse, and by putting PAYGO in place, we are essentially taking our own power away from our constituents that they imparted upon us when we ran for election. So I stand strongly against PAYGO being included. Excuse me. So I think that policy especially should stand on its own when it comes to education policy and appropriations. In 2014, I had the unfortunate pleasure of being one of those folks who voted against education appropriations because a voucher provision was added in, again, I might add, in the dead of night at 5 a.m. at a conference committee that was not properly advertised. That is a type of lack of transparency that I know that everyone in this body opposes. As far as recording votes, my votes are awesome, every single one of them, and I bet you all feel the same way about yours. And so frankly, we should be recording those and shouting them to the rooftops, because again, this is a deal and a vow that we made to our constituents that we would be open and transparent, that they know what we are doing. And finally, I am disappointed hearing some of the attitude that is expressed, such as, oh, well, we need to hurry through these processes. Sometimes things are tedious. Sometimes things take a while. We don't need to have those discussions. I understand that as a member of the minority party, that it is probably a bit of an annoyance for all of you to have to listen to us speak and to listen to us provide our dissent. But again, democracy is sacred, and one of the things that it is founded on is the fact that we all have the ability to dissent. So when the majority becomes the minority, because it'll happen eventually, please know that we will afford you all the courtesy and allow you to dissent. We will not stifle your debate because we are very good at being the bigger person. I'm very disappointed that things went the way that it did, but all that I can do is say that I will be voting against these rules with all respect to our chair and the process, but because of the lack of transparency, it simply violates my moral code to support them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Humphries, you may close.
Thank you, Buddy, for the really good debate. We heard a lot of things. I hope we all learned things. I especially want to thank the Rules Committee, the Chief Clerk, and especially the Revisor's Office that did so much work on this for quite a few weeks and a lot of hours. So thank you to everybody. Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports HR 6004 favorably for passage as amended.
You've heard the motion by Representative Humphries to report House Resolution 6004 favorable. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. Committee, I appreciate everyone listening so well. It must be the first day of school. And so we'll see how that goes along, but I do appreciate that. This does conclude general orders. The chair recognizes Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we rise and report.
You've heard the motion to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. No. Same. No to all those against. Motion passes.
The clerk will read the committee report.
Speaker, your Committee of the Whole recommends that HCR 5003 be adopted and HR 6004 be adopted as amended.
Speaker recognizes Representative Hoffman to adopt the committee of the whole report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion to adopt the committee report. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee report is adopted. Speaker recognizes Majority Leader Croft for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to House Rule 2311, I move that an emergency be declared and HCR 5003 and HR 6004 be advanced to the order of business, final action, and bills and concurrent resolutions.
You've all heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. Motion passes. Final action on bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
HCR 5003 by Representatives Hawkins, Croft, and Woodward, a concurrent resolution adopting joint rules for the Senate and the House of Representatives for the 2025-2026 biennium. HR 6004 by Representative Hawkins and Croft, a resolution adopting the permanent rules of the House of Representatives for the 2025-2026 biennium.
All members will be in their seats. This constitutes final action on HCR 5003. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. As every member had the opportunity to record their vote, the clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 104 having voted in favor and 19 against, the passage of HCR 5003, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. clerk will read.
HR 6004 by Representatives Hawkins and Croft, a resolution adopting the permanent rules of the House of Representatives for the 2025-2026 biennium.
This constitutes final action on HR 6004. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Representative Johnson votes. Representative Johnson votes with your hand, aye. Representative Wilburn votes aye. Representative Adam Smith votes aye. Representative Waymaster votes aye. Representative Minix votes aye. Representative Ballard votes no. Any further changes? Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any other member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 87 having voted in favor and 36 against the passage of HR 6004, the same having received constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Is there objection to returning to the order of business, introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions? Seeing none, the clerk will read.
House Bill 2067 by Representatives Poskins, Carlin, and others, an act concerning education. House Bill 2068 by Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, requested by William Wilk on behalf of the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, an act concerning the practice of cosmetology. House Bill 2069 by Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, requested by William Wilk on behalf of the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, an act concerning health and healthcare. House Bill 2070 by Committee on Commerce, Labor, Economic Development, requested by William Wilk on behalf of the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, an act concerning health and healthcare. HB 2071 by Committee on Health and Human Services, requested by Representative Bryce, an act concerning children and minors. HB 2072 by Committee on Health and Human Services, requested by Representative S. Ruiz on behalf of the Kansas Art Therapy Association, an act concerning the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. HB 2073 by Representative Sawyer Clayton, Brownlee Page, and others, an act concerning sales taxation. HB 2074 by Representative Sawyer Clayton, Brownlee Page, and others, an act concerning taxation. HB 2075 by Committee on Child Welfare and Foster Care, requested by Laura Howard, Secretary for Children and Families, an act concerning minors. HB 2076 by Committee on Child Welfare and Foster Care, requested by Laura Howard, Secretary for Children and Families, an act concerning minors. HB 2077 by Committee on Taxation, requested by Riley Going on behalf of Kansas Pet Advocates, an act concerning sales taxation. HB 2078 by Committee on Taxation, requested by Representative Thompson on behalf of Representative Bueller, an act concerning income taxation. HB 2079 by Committee on Taxation, requested by Representative Bryce on behalf of Representative Roth, an act concerning property taxation. HB 2080 by Committee on Taxation, requested by Representative Bryce on behalf of Representative Roth, an act concerning property taxation. HB 2081 by Committee on Taxation, requested by Representative Kessler, an act relating to taxation. HB 2082 by Committee on Appropriations, requested by Representative Waymaster on behalf of the Office of the Governor. An act making and concerning appropriations for the fiscal years ending June 30, 2025, June 30, 2026, and June 30, 2027 for state agencies. HB 2083 by Committee on Taxation, requested by Kimberly Ginser Savate on behalf of the Advanced Power Alliance. An act concerning property taxation. HB 2084 by Committee on Taxation, requested by Representative Kessler. An act concerning income taxation. HB 2085 by Committee on Water, requested by Leo Henning on behalf of the Department of Health and Environment. An act concerning livestock. HB 2086 by Committee on Financial Institutions and Pensions, requested by Representative Hoheisel. An act relating to the Kansas Public Employees Retirement System. HB 2087 by Committee on Insurance, requested by Dan Murray on behalf of the Kansas Association of Insurance Agents. An act concerning insurance. HCR 5006 by Representative Schmoy, Anderson, and others. A proposition to amend Section 4 of the Bill of Rights of the Constitution of the State of Kansas to recognize the right to bear arms as a natural and fundamental right. HB 2088 by Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, requested by Andrew Waynes on behalf of Opportunity Solutions Project. An act concerning housing. HB 2089 by Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, requested by Dan Murray on behalf of National Federation of Independent Business. An act concerning electronic payments transactions. HB 2090 by Representative Poskins, Amex, and others. An act concerning economic development.
Are there announcements? Seeing none. Nope. Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Attention Commerce fans, we will still meet at 1:30 because the Senate is, we're having a joint meeting and they only have an hour. And so we'll start, if you're going to be late, you're going to be late. Grab what you can to eat and get there as soon as you can. It's going to be an interesting meeting. We're reading through several audits on some of the incentive programs, and I think it'll be good to hear. So get there as soon as you can. Thank you.
Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to remind my committee that we are at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning for general government budget in the same room on second floor, 281 North. Thank you.
Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just wanted to remind everybody, transportation will meet as soon as you get something to eat and can get upstairs. We've got Secretary Reed with the Department of Transportation with us today. Thank you.
Representative Mosier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ag Natural Resources budget will meet, so grab something quick and get there as quick as you can because we have a full agenda today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Awerkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Welfare reform will just start at 1:45, so about 15 minutes late. Welfare reform will start at 1:45. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Estes.
Sorry, education will be starting on time. Please get there as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Seeing no further announcements, the Speaker recognizes the Majority Leader for a motion to adjourn.
Since everybody's talking about grab-and-go chairs, you have lunch at Grab and Go at 218 North, so get it and head to your meetings. Remember, tomorrow is going to be pro forma. Monday is pro forma, and then Tuesday through Thursday, we are on the floor. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until Friday, January 24th at 11 a.m. pro forma.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.